Hey, everybody, how are you tonight? Happy Thursday, or should I say Friday Eve. Um, Heading into the weekend here, and they're going to be talking tonight with Aaron Chepenik from Nevada H&C Distilling Company. Also, most of us know them as Smoke Wagon. That's the brand name of their whiskey. But the company is actually called Nevada H&C Distilling Company. So looking forward to talking with Aaron tonight. Seems like a really engaging guy. Just watching him on Instagram. And what's interesting is there's not really all that much about Nevada H&C Distilling Company out in the world, as I noticed as I was doing a little bit of research. So it'll be interesting to learn some new things, hopefully from Aaron tonight. Just kind of waiting for him to join here. As soon as he does, we'll bring him in. So be sure, guys, if you have any questions, you can just drop a comment. I'll try and keep track of the comments if I can. If not, if I don't see like a question from you, and after a while, you can actually type a message to me and send it, and I'll see it on my screen, and I can try and get to those. So please, if you have any questions, kind of drop them in the comments, and hopefully we'll try and get to those. It looks like Aaron is here, so let's bring him in.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, the man, the myth, the legend.
What's going on?
How are you, man?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Doing really well. I really appreciate you joining me for this tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So I see a bottle just passed by your face there. What do you got?
I got I don't know what you're going to be tasting, so I brought I've got some straight bourbon,
Yeah.
the small batch, and then you said you have the 57.6, right? Uncut.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
So
I got some of this stuff over here.
Yeah.
I don't know what these are. Oh, just some shit laying around.
Just laying around, right?
Just laying around. Nobody wants this. Dumb blue label thing.
So that one's a pretty popular one. And
It's funny because I was talking to someone about it today, and he was like, "Are you going to do another one?" And I said, it's a trip because I released Desert Jewel 2 years ago, and I did it because I had we had 35 barrels of tenure on the fourth floor, and I was like, "Oh man, this stuff, we got to get it out, right?" Well, 2 years ago, we probably sold like 15, maybe 18 barrels. Well, now if I had like 35 barrels on a high floor, I was like, okay, well, let's just sell them as barrel picks. I mean, we could sit, so it's a trip that it like even ever existed. So we'll see what happens.
Well, that's interesting. So you mentioned like how like the change from just 2 years ago and like the popularity of Smoke Wagon.
Yes. Let's see. I would say it was probably 7 months ago. One of the manager, Total Wine manager, called me. He's like, "What's going on with your brand?" And I said, "I don't know. What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, we're having people show up, and they're buying like 35 cases a time of the private barrel." And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard anything." And then just as we started getting into more states, the popularity grew, and it's been awesome. It truly is how everyone describes it, where you're just chugging along, right, for years, and then all of a sudden, just things start happening.
Yeah. Well, would you also, I have my opinions on what I think is a big part of it for you. Like the increase in popularity is you do an amazing job on social media.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean that was well. There's two things. One, we always had my business partner and I. We always had this philosophy where we were never going to lie about anything. Because even in the beginning, people were like, "Oh, source." 4 years ago, source bourbon was still like a dirty word.
Yeah.
And people didn't really understand what MGP was. They thought everything was made in Kansas. They didn't understand they bought the Seagram's plant from the 30s. And then coming from the bar business, the bars, it was never about me. It was always about and that's why they were always successful, because I didn't want to be like the guy, it wasn't like, oh, it was always about the customers and giving them what they wanted and kind of being in the shadows. And so initially on social media, that was it was just bottle shots all the time. And then, it was kind of, I realized that, everybody's just doing bottle shots. And so I just started talking about, some of the things we were doing and being more present on it,
Well, it's totally awesome. I was just wrapped up before I just hopped on here with you. I was watching some of your older videos, in your feed, and some of the ones on IGTV, and you're putting on there really cool behind the scenes things. I was watching a video of you taking from some samples and kind of putting together an Uncut Unfiltered.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then you showed the whole process of actually taking the huge tank, putting it into the bottling tank,
right?
And that behind the scenes stuff, for all the people that are watching here these are all whiskey nerds. So when we see that stuff, the behind the scenes, that's really, really cool. I think that's
thank you.
That's amazing, and I really do feel that, you coming in front of the camera probably had a really big part in helping your popularity. Now you're putting out great products too.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, before I started, I'm not my business partner and I, we're just a couple guys who decided to do this, right? I mean, it was 10 years ago. It's hard to believe. And originally it started with the vodka. But I had this vision in my head of how everything is done, from whether it's advertising or marketing, or all the images were given and all the people that talk about it and all. And then, initially I wanted to do everything from scratch. We can't, the state won't let us. In Nevada, they introduced a craft distiller's license, and we can't operate under that. So we have a rectifier's license. So technically I can't distill. I mean, I won't digress and get super long-winded about that. But I want to make everything from scratch because I had this vision of what that is, right? Sure. And then in 2012, it was 8 months after MGP bought the Seagram's plant, we flew out there. And I saw how it was done.
Yeah.
And it's everything I've been told is fucking bullshit. They're nobody's sniffing anything. Nobody's doing that. There's everybody's got hard hats and lab coats on, and they're watching computer screens that are telling them the chemical composition of the distillate. And then you start thinking, well, what would you rather have? Some guy who's been sniffing it for 30 years going, no, there's nothing in here that's going to make you go blind or die. Or have a computer saying, this is how much acetone's in there. There's no more acetone. Methanol is at this level. And then the other thing is, our initial space was that we're still in, we haven't done the expansion. It's 4,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And you go to that place and you're like, well, how the fuck do you scale to this, right? I mean, it was kind of like seeing a mansion from 1800s. There's no way to replicate that. That's the thing. The Seagrams those were all built in the 30s.
Yeah.
You can't build that anymore. And so I really wanted to show, kind of show people how it's really done. And also because just educate what we're doing with the brands. I get a question I get about Uncut Unfiltered all the time is, what's the age statement of this?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not, it doesn't have one. It's a vintage blend. You're never going to get that complexity from a single. So, and it's fun, I love doing it. I mean, the barrel picks are cool. It's really cool to see how they're all different, but there's no real creativity on my end for, you know, just like, hey, we got these barrels, you know, we didn't.
Right. Well, I mean, I suppose that you're picking like the best of the best for those barrel picks. So
that's the number one comment that I get during a barrel pick, where people say it's very hard to choose, because I weed out all the bad ones, and you know, and they say they usually just go to barrel picks and they randomly pull a bunch of barrels, and there's like one or two that stand out, and then the rest are, you know, it's not a hard decision to make. And so barrel picks usually take a while when you know, if I'm shipping out samples, it's usually faster, but like if it's arranged through a retailer, if a retailer shows up, you know, I can't do tours because we don't have a tasting room license, but when things are arranged through a retailer, we can do these barrel picks and like people be there for
that's like your day right there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Imagine. Well, so let's kind of like back it up a little bit. I have some questions for you, but I just love chatting back and forth like we are.
Sure.
But can you kind of just give us an idea? Like you kind of had mentioned, like, okay, so you and your business partners started off 10 years ago, but can you kind of tell us, like, we like to know about you guys, like what brought you, like where were you and where did you come from and decide to all of a sudden we're going to open up a distillery, you know, like where did you two come from to get to that point?
Well, we were already in business together. We owned a couple bars. I met him at the first bar that I did, and he loved it. Was really impressed. That one I actually built myself, and then so I just found out about what was going on in Las Vegas because I was still in LA at the time.
Okay.
And at that time in Los Angeles, I mean, it was it was like 16 years ago, and back then you couldn't turn a retail space into a bar. You had to buy an existing bar, and it was very expensive. So we came out to Las Vegas. I fell in love with Las Vegas. We had these bars, and we were drinking vodka back then. I mean, we were both crazy, just we were both maniacs back then. And we were drinking this Russian Diamond, which is the official vodka of the Kremlin, right? And it's silver filtered. And it was so smooth and neutral. And I was like, we were you know, it was like drunken night. And we were like, we're going to make this. We're going to make this in the United States. We're going to use corn so it's cheap. And, you know, I scoured the internet and found like silver filtration, like sales rep. She was Russian, but lived in India. Like we had to order everything from India. Now, if I was to do that part again, I just order the filters and have the system made here. The system's nothing special. It's just a piece of shit.
You learn as you go, right?
So, and the thing about the silver filtration system is silver, you know, they use it in Europe, kind of, it's like reverse osmosis. The silver has natural antibiotic and antiviral properties, and so it purifies water. Obviously, with vodka, it's like whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's ionized, and so it stops any ash residue from getting into the juice. And so it just kind of turned into this thing, like we were just joking about it. And then I was like, hey, I found the silver filtration system, you know, and I talked to a guy from the city of Las Vegas, and he pointed me towards this realtor, and she found us spaces that have the zoning we need. And he was like, yeah, all right, cool, let's go look at some spaces. And we just started doing it, you know. And I designed the bottle for the vodka. I wonder if I have one around here. Oh, shit, hold on. I have this. So they don't do this anymore. This is the lucite model. Now, when you get your first bottle model, they'll 3D print it. But back then, they would carve it out of a block of lucite.
Very cool.
So, and you can see on the back, it originally had all the desert sage on the back, but for the vodka coin, the federal treasury, you have to put copy on it somewhere so people aren't buying it thinking they're getting a real Morgan silver dollar. And we didn't want to do a little teeny tiny one on the front. So we got permission that if you could see through the bottle and said copy on the back, that was acceptable.
Oh, that's cool.
So, yeah, so I designed this on this program called SketchUp, which is not meant for doing this. And the reason was, they told me that this couldn't be done, that you could not have an insert on the front of a bottle. It had to be on on the shoulder. And so, and I was like, well, why? And they're like, oh, it's going to be a contact point on your assembly line. I was like, well, I appreciate your confidence that one day we'll have an assembly line, but I'm going to show you that it can be done. And so, especially with the circumference of the Morgan, so I was able, because it was a 3D program, I was able to figure out how far I could sink it in so that if we had like these bumpers here, it wouldn't be a contact point. So this was the first bottle ever made that was a round bottle that had anything on the front of it, because everyone said you couldn't do it. It couldn't be done. And
you had to prove them wrong.
I had to prove them wrong. Anytime somebody tells me I can't do something, that's it. Yeah, we're going to do it.
Well, that's crazy. Like, how did you, I mean, that's pretty amazing. Like, do you have like a background in design or in like
No.
product engineering or anything like
No. Which one are you drinking right now?
So I was just sipping on the straight bourbon.
All right, I'm gonna.
That's this one here for everyone viewing at home. And thanks everyone for joining in. We got a lot of people watching tonight, which is really nice. So this is the straight bourbon, and it's 92.5 proof. That's a tasty one. That's really
Thank you.
good.
Yeah. Well, we'll get back to that. I don't want to get off track.
No, that's all right. I do have a...
No, because I will get off track. It's very hard for me to... I'll go in all kinds of directions.
All right.
And I'll be like, wait, what was I talking about?
That's okay. That's what this is all about.
So we did this for the vodka. We chose the Morgan because it was minted in Carson City.
Yeah.
And it was called Silver Dollar because it was silver filtered. And then I stopped drinking vodka. I started drinking bourbon because I had to slow it down. I was like, it was crazy. Man, those were crazy times. It was a different world, right?
Different time, yeah.
Like, I mean, 15 years ago, what was that? There was no Apple, there was no iPhones. There was no recording of anything. The bar business was significantly crazier 15 years ago when no one was taking pictures or recording anything. The world was a wild place, right? With no dating, and I was like, okay, I woke up one day and looked in the mirror and I was like, I need to slow down. I need something that I'm not going to drink like 20 of in 15 minutes. And so I started drinking bourbon. And
what were you drinking at the time? What was
Four Roses single barrel.
Oh, very nice.
That was my favorite. I really liked the rye. Obviously we got this high rye mash bill, and so I really liked the rye. That was my favorite. And then also you got to remember, like, there wasn't a lot. I mean, when I really got into bourbon when the mixology thing started happening in the bar business, and I was like, I don't want to hate on it because it is a craft and I appreciate it. But at the same time, that's not what my bar was. We were like, rock and roll bar in Las Vegas. I mean, it's too much volume to like have 10-minute drinks,
Yeah.
And so I was just like, look, we're just going to get every brown spirit we can because there's so many of them. And I mean, it was insane. I wish I kept everything.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one year I got 3 years in a row of the antique collection because the Southern, they didn't know what it was. I asked them, I was like, oh, do you have this? They're like, oh yeah, we got it. We got 3 boxes, it was the 3-packs.
Yeah.
I had, it cost a lot of money even then. I had the first release of the Celebration,
Oh, very nice.
Wish I kept that.
Well, I mean, how would you know that, like, it would become more like where we are today? Like, it's insane.
The funny thing is, I don't know if I would do anything differently because people always ask me about, oh, what do I have? I'm like, I don't have anything. I just drink it.
Yeah.
My collection's in my brain. That's where it all went. That's don't make more. Yeah.
That's what it's about anyway. I mean, you got to drink the stuff.
Yes. I mean, that's really why I wanted to come out with a straight bourbon. I wanted something that was superior, that everyone could afford, and no one like felt bad, you know, sharing with their friends, or you didn't really have to save it for a special occasion. You know, same with the Uncut Unfiltered. It's like one of our core brands. I mean, sorry, expressions. I mean, it's definitely, it's not out there as much as like small batch or the straight bourbon, but it's like, you know, and also I want everything to be affordable.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's the thing. So going back to how it all began, people like, oh, you should make bourbon. And I was very intimidated about that process. And so I shit, I don't know how much of this I should talk about. But
yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I hired Dave Pickerel, you know, and he hadn't even really started Whistle Pig yet. And so the head of sales at MGP used to be the head of Maker's Mark, and he's fired Dave from Maker's Mark.
Okay.
And they hated each other. And so so that's why we ended up going to Indiana, because they wouldn't deal with Dave.
Yeah.
And so and yeah, and everybody's like, well, you just buy stuff. That's what everybody else does. You know, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Sure, well, you know, we'll do that. And so we just I mean, it's amazing, like the timing of everything.
Yeah. Well, you were there at the right time, I think, probably.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And we bought everything they would sell us. We bought all the preneur card inventory, and they had done 2 laydowns of the 36% rye. We bought all of that. And then we started, every year we started contracting them to do laydowns for us, which is why everything is so affordable. You know, another thing, going there, right? Like, there is a line of grain trucks just lined up, belly dump grain trucks, just ready. Who's going to get a better price on grain? Them
Seriously, yeah.
or me? You know, it's like, and barrels. And so the everything, it's just,
it's all baked in when you go there.
yes,
It's just ready to go.
And to, you know, obviously there's the romance side of it and the things that I enjoy doing, and then there's a pragmatic side. Well, how do you scale? Well, the way I scale now is with a phone call. I say, hey, like, let's do 1,200 barrels instead of 600 barrels. And they're like, okay, cool, whatever, we'll schedule you in. Not like, oh shit, let's go buy some equipment and, you know, figure out where we're going to put all this. And
yeah.
not that we could distill from scratch anyhow.
Yeah, but I mean, then you understand, like, when you see like some of the craft producers out there who put out, you know, a 90 proof whiskey, and it's, you know, approaching $100. It's because it's not cheap to do what they do, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, and that was the thing too, coming from the bar business. I mean, I love designing stuff anyhow, but that's why I was really focused on the packaging. And then, so once it came time to do the bourbon, let's see, it all started with the small batch. And we chose Smoke Wagon because, you know, the Morgan for the vodka was the currency of the Old West, and Smoke Wagon is Old West slang for the Colt Single Action Army Revolver, the gun that won the West. And since everything was kind of Western theme, I chose the amber bottle, which was another thing.
Amber bottle.
Thank you. Everyone told me I couldn't do it in amber bottle, we'd fail. And because this is how bourbon came in the late 1800s, everything, because they thought it preserved it better.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing too. Like, all these smaller guys were doing anything that sort of had like a old timey look. It was like, you know, there was like cheap and shitty looking, right? Yeah. I was like, that's not what people were doing back then. They were showing off their skills. I mean, like, if you look, there's like encyclopedias that you would go if you want to do a monogram, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've got this like 150-page book just to do your monogram, and everything was like you know, it was kind of like this perfect time where there was the Industrial Revolution and there was artisans, and so you could like sort of mass produce really. I mean, don't get me wrong. Once the Industrial Revolution started, they were mass producing crap as well. Yes. But you could mass produce like really fine things. And when you look at the glass from the expensive products, they all had like, they all had raised, letters on them, and everything was beautiful, and the labels had gold leaf and tooling. And so that's what I wanted to emulate. And then also, you pick it up, you're gonna, if somebody's gonna spend this much time on the exterior, you would hope they would spend that much time on the interior, what's inside, which I did.
Yes, and it shows for sure.
Thank you. So that's like, so that was so. All right. Oh, okay. So, there's more. Everything with this business where I thought I was getting screwed, I was getting saved for myself. So the big one was when we first went to MGP, we bought the preneur card stuff that we bought from them was 5 years old. And that's what we were going to.
So when you went there, this was like shortly after it switched from like LDI to MGP.
Yeah.
So, and they found themselves, so you're referring to the Preneur Recode inventory. So they found themselves with like all this stuff that they were like, I've heard stories that they were like, well, what do we even have here?
Yeah, I mean, the 8-year, I made up those barrel numbers because Pernod Ricard hand wrote barrel numbers on them, but LDI didn't do anything. There was no LDI inventory at all. They didn't have the money. They didn't have the money to lay down anything that they weren't contracted to lay down.
Yeah.
And then MGP, they didn't do the barrel numbers. But yeah, it was, I guess there was some weird stuff going on as far as inventory and everything. And so thank God we bought these two 5,000-gallon tanks, and we were going to dump all that 5-year bourbon into those two tanks.
Uh-huh.
So that's all the 12-year stuff, right? Now.
Yeah.
And the tanks never got approved. And it took so long that the stuff that we bought that was MGP laydown that was like 3 months old when we bought it, now it was 4 years old. And so back then, 4 years, now you see bourbon, 2-year bourbon, nobody gives a shit that it's got an age statement set, because I guess it used to be if you had an age statement, you had to have it on the front. Now, I guess the TTB says you can kind of make it part of your puffery, Yeah. So, like, you'll see something that has 2-year bourbon in it, and you got to search the back to see.
Oh, for sure. And they finesse the statement, too. They'll say, like, aged up to 2 years or aged more than 2 years. And that could be 2 years and, 20 seconds. But, yeah.
So, we didn't want to have an age statement on it. And it was funny because we hired a fire design specialist, figured out how to build this wall and all this crap for the two tanks. And it was like, I don't even remember what the price, it was over $200,000. It was insane. And I was just like, wait a second. It's now, I was like looking at the date. I was like, in February, we're going to have 4-year bourbon. And so the original plan was, because this is what everybody told me, was we were going to use the 4-year bourbon to step it down every year until we get it to be 5-year. So I totally fucked with my business partner. I called him and I said, hey, I figured out how we could get these tanks approved, and it's like $200,000. He's like, what? I was like, but we don't have to do it because in February we're going to have 4-year bourbon. Yeah. So that summer we were going to release the small batch as an 8-year. And we never got picked up by our distributor. They approved us, but they never made an order. And then when the 4-year came around and I started messing around and blending with it, I was like, this is better. This is better than the 8-year on its own. I mean, in my opinion, because the rye spice, the 8-year was very smooth and it was delicate and it was beautiful. But I like that rye spice, and the rye spice was gone. And so because of these tanks not getting approved, that's how I started messing around blending with vintages. And again, everybody advised me was like, you don't want to do that. You either want to have an 8-year with an age statement, or you want it to be as young, as palatable as it can be, so that it's cheap. Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to do this. This is what we're going to do. And so that's just how it all started. And then we submitted that to San Francisco, and the small batch won a gold. And then all of a sudden, the distributor was like, "Hey, why don't you come on in and we'll talk to you about releasing you guys." It's like, oh, weird. After winning a medal, shocker.
Yeah, interesting how that works, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you guys won a gold that year, and then you win the gold the following year as well, correct?
The following year, the following year, what did I have? The following year, Private Barrel won a double gold, Uncut Unfiltered won a double gold, and Small Batch won a gold again.
Wow.
And so at that time, we were one of only 3 brands to ever have 2 bourbons win a double gold in the same year. And the fact that, and everyone told me I wasn't going to win anything with a cast strength bourbon because it's too hot and but the whole thing, the reason I did a vintage blend with the Uncut was I wanted it to taste its best at cast strength. A lot of these cast strength, well, my video from yesterday points out, these uncut bourbons, high proof bourbons, you go to the manufacturer's website and they're like, "Oh, please enjoy some spring water." I'm like, what's the fucking point? I was like, I can take small batch, right? Where is it? It's right here. I can take small batch. This is too thin at without water. You have this without water, it's gonna be too thin, and you'd be like, oh, that's too hot. Oh, and they're like, yeah, please enjoy with some spring water. Maybe proof it down to like 100 proof. You might like it a little bit better, And so the goal with Uncut was to create something that tasted its best neat. And so it's like it's a balance between those the sugars, those lipid esters, and the tannins, because what most people associate as a harshness is not alcohol heat. A lot of that is the oak tannins. And so the older juice is going to give you that nice high concentration of lipids that's going to insulate your palate from the heat, but it's going to be very tannin heavy. And then the younger juice might be too thin on its own, but it's going to cut down on the oak. It's going to bring in all those beautiful flavors that disappear over time. And so, and it's a trip too, because originally the Uncut was just an 8 and a 4 year. And then once I started getting it to be like a 4 or 6, all these different vintages, it really became its own flavor profile. When I go back and try the 8 and 4 year one, I can taste like 8 and 4 year, but the new ones, they don't taste like the ingredients. It's a completely different flavor profile.
So how many batches are you doing a year of like the Uncut Unfiltered? Like how many times are you putting together blends for that?
Probably not a lot. I mean, it's all changing now,
Yeah.
But in the past, maybe 5 a year at the most. Especially when we're only locally here. And that's the funny thing is, locally, Las Vegas is a very unique market where it's primarily bars and restaurants and casinos. So small batch was always like the big mover. And then as we got into other markets where they're primarily liquor stores, it's all about Uncut Unfiltered, Desert Jewel when it was around, the Private Barrel, things like that.
Yeah, I can imagine like the different kind of clientele that's coming in. Like if I'm going into the liquor store, I'm searching for that cast strength bottle. Yeah.
And that was a conversation and I focused on liquor stores like in the beginning, and everyone was like, "Oh no, you get into a bar and people are going to taste it in a bar and they're going to go to a liquor store and buy it." And I was like, "I own bars." No, they're not. That's an out. Like maybe if you're talking about the newest flavor of rum or Fireball or something like that, and it's like kids figuring out what to buy for the party, like they're having at their house. But no, it's like, and people will, one of the reasons I want to put the batch numbers on the Uncut Unfiltered is because Uncut Unfiltered, each one really is different. I'm not trying to get a consistent flavor profile with Uncut Unfiltered.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get it to where there's not a lot, there's just enough heat on the finish at the moment I'm blending it and depending on the time of year and the temperature and everything is going to totally dictate how that tastes.
Yeah.
I started, like in that one video, I started to get a little crazy with small batch, and it was starting to become inconsistent. And small batch is not supposed to be small batch. And I had to go back to its roots and just do a 2 vintage blend and get it to that flavor profile. It was a little thin out of the bottle and had this specific flavor profile. But I mean, the thing is, it's like, I understand, something like having, like, if there was 3 batches of Uncut Unfiltered at the liquor store, I get buying all 3 because I have every batch in my house.
Yeah.
And there's times where I'm like, ooh, I want this one, or I want that one because, you know, maybe it's a little warmer out and there's one that I batched during the summer, and so I know it's like really thick, really insulating my palate from the heat.
Yeah.
And then there's another one where I want to be a little thinner because I'm gonna be outside in the cold and smoking a cigar, and I want it to like really kind of cleanse my palate of that tobacco, and you know.
Well, I like that you, like, when you're putting the Uncut Unfiltered together, like, you're not, it's a batch, like, it's that
Yes.
specific batch. It's not, you're not trying to match it up to the batch before it. There may be some general things that you want to get out of, like you mentioned, like the finish. You want it to maybe finish a certain way.
Correct.
But the profile can be completely different. And I love that, like you just said that like, you can go and pick up, like, and I suppose right now you can figure out the different batches based on
From the proof. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's really cool insight into how you put those together. And
Yeah.
I think someone was talking about transparency on here, and I think you guys are like, you're super transparent that it's MGP that you guys are working with. I mean, you've already talked about it here several times tonight.
Right.
But I think I like that. Again, that's another thing that, like, as consumers, like, we want that transparency. We want to know, like, we don't want like these statements like distilled in Kentucky, bottled in Nevada, you know, and it's just like this, distilled in Kentucky, I mean, it could be anything, you know.
Right.
So, like, I mean, I know when it says distilled in Indiana on your product, but, like, you talk openly about its MGP.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and by the way, when I put that on the label, the TTB was not actively enforcing state of distillation when people were getting their label approvals. And now you can see that they are, right? Because now all of a sudden, people don't have a straight bourbon anymore. They have a blend of straight bourbons, right? Because once you have multi-state bourbons, you can take your state of distillation off there. If I name your still Bertha, say, oh, we're distilling our own juice. It's great. Everything's different now.
Yeah.
You take your eyedropper and you put it in your barrel and you walk around and, you know, put a drop in all your sourced bourbon, and now it's multi-state and it's a blend of straight bourbons, and you know.
Yeah, there's definitely some interesting things that can happen. Like, sometimes on those labels that are very, very vague, you're just like, man.
I don't know. I don't get it. I guess it all is about why you're doing it. My business partner and I were doing it because we wanted to make something that we like. You know, we both felt that there was things lacking. He really likes cocktails. My favorite thing to do. There's summertime here, right? 114 degrees at 2 in the afternoon. Okay, I'm not going to drink anything neat. I don't want any. I mean,
yeah,
I want something on the rocks. And so the small batch was for us. It was like something that we felt that the market was lacking. And so we created it so that we would enjoy it, you know, and hopefully other people would enjoy it. Because you can't go around trying to figure out what other people are going to want. You have to do it for yourself, and hopefully there's people out there that share your same palate and like the flavors you like.
For sure.
But the other people, why are they doing it? Is it to make money? Is it like, you know, after High West sold for what, 130 million when they're doing 50,000 5-liter cases? So really, industry standard that's 25,000 cases, all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, fuck, let's open a distillery. Oh, what do you need? You need a story. Yeah. Oh, I dug up his chest and it had a recipe from, you know, Prohibition. Like, I don't want to bring, I mean,
no, yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm sure that really happened. But at the same time, it's like there's a difference trying to create something new versus creating something, you know, like, oh, we're trying to resurrect something, right?
Yeah.
And then it's the whole story. When you're trying to create something new, it stands on its flavor profile. You don't need a bullshit story because it's like, hey, we wanted, you know, hope.
Yeah.
Like, and I think I was doing a whiskey event, and I was going through everything, and I was like, yeah, we wanted this to taste like this and have these flavors, and you know, the only exception would be Desert Jewel, because I just, you know, was like, oh shit, we gotta. And again, because it was a 10-year, I felt like some of the barrels were over oaked, and so at cast strength, it was 210 and heavy, so we proofed it down to 104 to you know, get rid of some of that with the water. And they're like, no one's talking like this. No one's saying, hey, I created this because I like this flavor. I wanted this to taste like this. And by the way, when I say flavor, I'm terrible picking out flavors. If you like see any of my videos, like, oh, caramel, brown sugar. I mean, like pretty obvious stuff. Yeah. And in the beginning, when I made small batch, they're like, oh, what do you think? I was like, oh, it's good. Well, like, oh, can you be more descriptive? Like, yeah, it's really fucking good, you know? And so,
well, yeah. I mean, in the end, that's what it needs to be anyway, right? I mean, it's gotta taste good no matter what other all these crazy flavors are that you're picking out of it. I do like to sit there and kind of like think about whiskey sometimes, and sometimes I also just want to pour it in the glass and drink it and not like think about it so much.
Uncut Unfiltered, I love thinking about it.
Yes.
Even though from one batch, every bottle's different. It tastes completely different depending on the temperature, like what's going on. I love, you know, and I'll spend an hour with a glass, right?
I'm going to put a little in the glass.
Okay.
Let's get to tasting this. I've been drinking the straight bourbon up until now, so
completely different.
Yeah, let's do the Uncut Unfiltered, and so we're drinking the same thing. This is the 57.6.
That's what I got
ABV.
here.
Yeah, so we're looking at 115.2 proof on this bad boy. So it's got some nice heat to it.
Oh my
Beautiful
God!
color on it too. But the thing about this that really, like, when I just opened this last night and I poured it into the glass and I started to nose this and I was like, man.
No heat on the nose though, right?
No,
isn't that insane?
It's like super sweet on the nose.
It's trapped in there. It's trapped in there by all those lipid esters. It's so thick that it won't. And so even if you hold this in your mouth, right, the Kentucky mouthwash or whatever, you know, you're never going to access the heat until you swallow it or spit it out.
Yeah, get like a little bit of oxygen flowing into it. But yeah, the nose on this is like really sweet, and I get like a little chocolatiness off of it.
There was like more heat. Yeah, there's like no heat on that finish. That's crazy. Yeah, Uncut Unfiltered is my favorite. It's the hardest to get right, which is why it's the biggest challenge.
But the finish on this is like.
Oh, and then that rye spice that like will follow you home and tuck you into bed just keeps coming. It's like
maple syrup and then rye spice, and just like keeps, and like you said, it just keeps like coming back.
So you'll never get that complexity from a single vintage. There's no way. It's never not like that. Not all those flavors, and that's why Uncut Unfiltered is one that I do like to pick out flavor and sit there and just hold in my mouth for a few seconds and try to figure out what's going on. You know, nice. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the straight bourbon, you don't have to pick out shit. You can just drink it. You go, hey, that's yummy. That tastes good. You know. Yeah. And that was the thing, like for you know, an everyday entry level bourbon, and I kind of talked about it in that one video where and a true entry level bourbon should be something everyone you go into the Desert Jewel.
Yeah. I gotta taste
Making some people jealous right now.
Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Oh, no problem.
yeah.
But anyone should be able to try that and not have to pick out flavors and just say, hey, I like this experience. This tastes good, you know? And sometimes that's all I want. Sometimes if I'm out in public, I'm not going to be sitting there, you know, if I'm with friends or in a social setting, I'm not going to be sitting there going, wait, hold on a second. Just trying to figure out, stop talking to me. I'm trying to get some flavors here, you know? You just, and also you don't really want to be drinking the 116 proof bourbon because you might be having 2 or 3, you know? And it's nice when you're home, chilling out, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So there's been a lot of people inquiring about your relationship with MGP, and so you said you're doing contract distilling with them.
Yes.
And you have a significantly long contract with them to do that, or how does that work? Can you comment on that?
Well, I mean, our main contract that ties us in with them is our you know, the rental, right? Because we have all those barrels, and so we have this rental contract, and so that as long as they're renewing the rental contract, I mean, they like us because we've never lied. Not only have we not lied about it, but we've educated people and said, you don't get it. This facility is amazing. It's incredible. It is the only place in America where the way Seagram's engineered it in the 30s, where the proof goes down over time.
Right.
So we've had multiple conversations with them, like, hey, are we ever in danger of being cut off or anything like that? Because we really like the way things are. And they're like, no, don't worry about it.
Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
All right. So we addressed that. Let's talk about Desert Jewel. We've only got, Aaron, this hour has like flown by. It's been such a good time talking to you. So the way it works on Instagram is like they boot us off at 1 hour. So we only have 60 minutes. So let's talk about Desert Jewel. So this is now like what's out in the world is what's out in the world for a while, or is this ever coming back?
We'll see. I don't know. You know, I mean, I won't have any 10-year bourbon for a year and a half, but it doesn't necessarily have to be 10-year bourbon. I mean, we'll you know, because I have all this stuff on the 5th floor, and I don't know how long it'll last, or it could be something completely different. It might not be a single vintage. I could come up with a blend, like say a cask strength blend that I really like, but I can't do it in Uncut. You know, Uncut's a specific price point, and I might be like, oh, I would love to release this, but I can't because I can't do it at the price point of Uncut. So we'll see what happens. You know, I am coming out with something new. It won't be called Desert Jewel. We're kind of because it'll be like another like core expression. So we're just gonna hold on to the Desert Jewel name and see what happens in the future. You know.
Well, that's great. So there's a possibility that it could be some other type of blend that you're doing, and you release it under Desert Jewel.
Yeah, because Desert Jewel, it was never like, oh shit, you know what we need to do, from a marketing standpoint, is come out with a 10-year. Yeah. Kids are crazy for the 10-year right now. We need that. I don't give a shit about age statements. I really don't. I could care less. And it just was a necessity. It's like I said, if it happened today, there wouldn't be a Desert Jewel because I could sell 35 private barrels in a short amount of time and not be worried about, you know, them getting over oaked or empty or, you know, things like that. But 2 years ago, there's no way. I mean, there's 35 barrels was a ton of barrels to us. And so it was created for that purpose. Like, these are done. Like, these can't spend any more time on that high floor, and I'm not going to rotate them. I'm not going to roll them down, roll them all over. I mean, I don't know if that's something we've talked about, but I never rotate barrels. That's a nice thing. Besides being able to pick the floor when we're contracting stuff, MGP will rotate their barrels. Everybody will rotate their barrels, and I make sure that they stay same floor, same rack. Everything's racked. Everything's in the Seagram's warehouses. Nothing's palletized in the new warehouses. And that's where they sit, because in my opinion, you start rolling them around, you break up that char, and you lose the balance. Everything becomes over oaked.
Yeah.
And so,
So when you are, and by the way, I looked at the clock wrong before. We still have 10 minutes. So
okay.
I thought it was saying 9:28, but it was only 9:18. So my eyes. But anyway, so when you're talking about floors, when in your videos, you're talking about where the warehouses and floors are located at MGP?
At MGP in Indiana, correct.
Okay.
When they come to me, we just put them on the ground.
Yeah.
They're just all laying on the ground.
And then like these ones were there.
Yes.
And that's like when you're referring to them and we're seeing the barrels and you're saying, yeah, these ones over here are 5th floor warehouse
Correct.
C. Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's good information to know. I wasn't sure like if you had barrels shipped to you and you were storing them in Vegas.
I do store them for about 6 months, 6 to 8 months. It makes a difference. They change for sure.
I can imagine they go up in proof maybe a little bit in that time.
Well,
period.
I mean, obviously the one that we've had for 4 years went from 115 proof to 135 proof. And that was the crazy, because 2 years ago, that barrel was disgusting. That was the only reason I kept it was to show people how bourbon gets ruined by being in Las Vegas. And then 2 years later, the oak disappeared, which I've never seen.
That's amazing. I mean, it's interesting how that all works. Like, I've heard people talk about they'll lay down some new make, and then 2 years in, they call it barrel sick. Like the barrel is ruined the juice, but then 2 years later, all of a sudden, like you described, it's amazing.
Yeah. That's what happened with this one. I mean, and so that's the thing. The guys that were doing it here locally, he unfortunately has passed, but he told me he was getting a 48% volume loss the first year, right?
Oh.
So that's why you see a lot of these craft guys, they have 2-3-year-old bourbon that is really expensive and isn't very good. They lost
it all, yeah.
Yeah, they lost it all. And they're like, well, shit, what are we going to do? We got to get this out, And
yeah.
So...
Yeah, the environment there is definitely a different ball game to deal with than what they're dealing with in Indiana.
Oh yeah, complete opposite.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah, we have zero humidity. It's like only 6% in the summertime. I mean,
Yeah, right. Yeah, 6% and 120 degrees.
I love it. I mean,
yeah. As
long as that humidity is at 6%. In the summer when it's 12%, we're all like, oh, it's like we're in Florida. It's terrible. I can't handle it.
All right, so I've got a burning question for you.
Sure.
Where do you get all those awesome Wrangler shirts?
Boot Barn Western Superstore on Las Vegas Boulevard.
Actually, that's one of the so a lot of the comments that I got, people would DM me questions to ask you tonight. A lot of them were about MGP, what's the situation there. A lot of them were the Wrangler shirts, and then I'm trying to think.
They're the only shirts that fit me.
They're great shirts, by the way. They look very there's a vintage feel to all of them.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And then the other question everyone is asking is, when is Smoke Wagon getting to my state? So what is the situation with your distribution now? And what are you expecting over the next, couple years, whatever it may be?
Okay, couple years, totally good. Next few months. So Colorado and Texas are next.
And you just expanded here to Chicago, Illinois.
Yes.
All
you
of
guys,
Illinois.
man. Let me tell you something. You guys are monsters.
Yes.
It has been awesome. It's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and every shipment is sold out. And it's pretty amazing,
Yeah.
And that's one of the things where, you have these moments of insecurity. One was, and it all coincided with Chicago, because one's will people still love me when the 12-year bourbon's gone? Because there's only 20 barrels left. And then, oh shit, the straight bourbon has just blown up. Everybody wants a straight bourbon. I was like, oh, okay. And then the other one is like, well, what's going to happen in these other markets where we're not local? And it's like, it's awesome. And so you're like, okay, everything's going to be okay. But
so how many states are you in now?
Well, we're New York and New Jersey. That I did through a broker. It's okay. Arizona, California, which I have a super tiny distributor because I don't have time to go there and I didn't want to hire a brand ambassador. And I knew the guy, and so I was just like, fine. So it's doing fine. It's doing what I needed to do. It's awesome. And then Illinois here, obviously, and then Colorado and Texas are like right around the corner. And so Colorado should be good, but Texas is going to be insane, And,
oh, yeah.
I mean, even if Texas is just like Illinois, it's going to be insane. And so I might have to wait until after the expansion is done to do, because we're kind of pushing the limits of what our facility can do. Not necessarily in production, because I have juice and I have barrels, but I don't have storage for inventory. So when I start getting these big orders, I don't have a place to stack like 3 truckloads of pallets. I can stack maybe 1 truckload of pallets. And so it starts getting like a little, and also I don't want anything to ever suffer, I mean,
sure, yeah.
We don't have an exit strategy. My business partner and I have talked about it a million times. Like, we don't want to sell. I like working. We like having something to show for ourselves. I'm not going to start another fucking business from scratch again. I've done it like 5 times. I'm almost 50. I'm done. I'm not doing that again. 20 years ago, oh yeah, it was awesome. When I was young, woo, fucking tear it up, man. Now, no. And so we don't care. I'd rather grow slow and have. Oh my God! Now I'm watching the clock. I got 3 minutes. I'd rather grow slow and have everything be right. We're not trying to push cases out. And another thing, right, because we don't have investors, it's just 2 of us, we're not trying to sell. Like, we've had conversations kind of along the lines of what I was talking about yesterday. What if our inventory, what if the straight bourbon does so successful, we blow through our day one stuff that was really affordable and we have to buy existing inventory from MGP? Well, we're like, we'll just eat it. We'll just eat it for 3 years. We'll just keep because we have a plan for the straight bourbon of what we want it to be in the next 5 to 10 years. We don't have an exit strategy. So we'll just take the hit for 3 years and keep the price the same. And then we'll have inventory again and it'll all work out,
Yeah.
And so, so it's like, it's nice. It's like, everything's been positive. The people have been amazing. It's been a great business. And it's always creative. Like the bar business, I love designing the bars. Once it's open, that's it. You're just managing this. There's always, you're always doing something new. It's always, so states, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Give me like 3 months. I'll see what the strain is on our current facility, and then decide from there.
Oh, it's really amazing. And like,
we got 2 minutes.
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes. So what I want to say to you is, one, I pride myself on doing a lot of research before I do these interviews.
Right.
You guys are a mystery. Like, there is nothing written about Smoke Wagon. You're not on any podcasts. You're not on any YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So I was like trying to do research, and I'm like, these guys are ghosts down there. It's like very mysterious. So I appreciate you coming on with me tonight.
Yeah, there's no local brand recognition. All the brand recognition is outside of the state. So I think there was one review journal article about us when we won the 2 double golds.
I did see that. I did come across that, and there's like a 1-minute video of you kind of talking about everything. So that's like the one thing that I found out there about you guys. But I really do appreciate you coming on here.
Absolutely, man. My pleasure.
I mean, this hour is absolutely flown by.
Yeah.
You were worried. You said an hour sounds like a long time, but it flew by.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it. You guys are putting out some really excellent whiskey. And
thank you. I really appreciate it.
please keep up what you're doing on Instagram, because we're all following along, and we'd love to see you, and we'd love to see you talk about the process. So keep that up, and let's stay in touch, and let's do this again soon.
Absolutely, anytime, man.
All right, man. Aaron, great to speak to you, and we'll talk soon. All right,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, man. Take care.
You do the same. Oh, hold on, it's still going.
All right, guys. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining the Urban Bourbon Hour tonight. Like, that hour absolutely flew by. Great conversation. We kind of just jumped right into it from the go, and that was really fun. So thank you for joining, and until next time, guys, cheers.